Yes, sir, it's visible.
Okay. So let us come to now second part of linear algebra. Till now, what we have been looking at is more of uh, static part of linear algebra. I call it as static part of linear algebra, because nothing was moving in this part. To understand what is the dynamic part of a subject, you must have studied uh, calculus. Calculus, there is a static part, that is the construction of the real number system and its properties, the notion of sequences and so on. And then the dynamics part starts when you start looking at functions on the real line. Something similar happens when you study, for example, algebra. A course in algebra, you start looking at a set with some properties, some operations on it. Say, for example, in group theory, you will look at binary operation with some properties so that it forms certain structure is there, and you look for objects with similar structures and examples of that. And at a later stage, you go to the dynamics of that object, namely, you look at what are called homomorphisms and isomorphisms and so on. In a course in topology, you look at a set with a structure called topological structure on it, and then you look for what are called continuous maps and so on. So in our subject is motivated by geometry. So we are looking at uh, we looked at subsets of Rn which had the property similar to that of Rn, namely which are closed under linear operations. So closed under addition and scalar multiplication. Right. So now the next thing we want to look at is the maps between one vector space to another. So for to motivate that, let me why one should be looking at that. So let us hope my technology plays a part, and if this plays good, otherwise we'll see it later on. So look at a small video clip that we prepared, and I hope it starts moving. Yes. I don't know whether you observed these things or not. Probably let me play it again. Now you keep an eye on what are the things that is happening, so that we take up from there and start looking at them. So here is sun going, so that is a rotation. Clouds moving, air moving, so their translation going left and right. Okay, here is a rotation again. This windmill rotating, this balloon becoming bigger and bigger, and the fan, the flag changing direction. So these were some of the things which one would like. We observe it, and we do it every day, and we would like to sort of study them mathematically. So to start with, let us ask the question: that you take a function t, we normally call it as a map because it is from a space R3 to R3, which preserves the geometry. So what is the geometry in R3? Collinearity. If 3 points are collinear, that is collinearity. And then division ratios. So we want to look at those maps from R3 to R3 which preserve the geometry of R3. They don't change the geometry of R3, right? For example, if I take a constant map, everything shrinks to 1 point, then that does not preserve division ratios, okay? And all the points are collapsed into 1 point. So we want to study these things, and one can very easily analyze these things. So we want to look at those t from R3 to R3 that leave the origin fixed. One, the origin is not shifted anywhere. And if u, v and w are collinear in R3 in the domain, then the images tu, tv and tw are also collinear. That means straight lines are mapped into the straight lines, and the ratios are preserved. If u divides v and w in a ratio d, then tu divides tv and tw also in the same ratio. So that is called preserving the division ratios. So the question is, what are the maps which preserve the geometry of R3, maps T? So the answer is given by the following theorem. It says that the following statements are equivalent. T preserves collinearity and division ratios and leaves origin fixed. That is our question. Is equivalent to saying T satisfies the following two properties, namely T of V1 plus V2 should be equal to TV1 plus TV2. The image of the sum should be equal to sum of the images, and image of a scalar multiple should be equal to the same scalar multiple times the image. So if these two properties are satisfied, then that is equivalent to saying T preserves collinearity and division ratios. One can actually prove this result. So let me just sketch through the proof. Right. For a linear transformation, T0 is equal to 0, right? For here T0, if alpha is 0, then T0 will be 0. So let us suppose the proof. So let us suppose that one holds T preserves collinearity and division ratios. So let's call T0 equal to V0, and let us define phi V to be TV minus T0. Okay. Then we would like to show that phi has that property. Okay. So you can look at V minus lambda V. So that is lambda minus 1, 0 minus V. And that means since 0 and V are collinear, 0 V and lambda V are collinear points, the above equality says that V divides in this ratio, lambda and lambda in the ratio, division ratio is lambda minus 1. And with that, since by the given hypothesis, T of that should be equal to lambda of T of that. The collinearity goes to collinearity. So that is translated as T of V minus T lambda V is lambda V minus lambda minus 1 T0 TV. Okay. T of that should be equal to T of that. So that is same as, okay, simplifying because T is bring everything on the other side, and then you have TV minus T0, and that is this minus T0. So that is phi V minus phi of lambda V is equal to this, and that implies phi of lambda V. If you simplify this, phi of lambda V is equal to lambda times phi of V. Okay, yeah. Also, a similar calculation, if you do it for V1 plus V2 in R3, you look at 2 times V2 is minus V1 plus V2 is minus 1 by 2. Okay, because of the division ratios, we would like to write this as a division ratio and apply the thing. So 2v2 divides v1 plus v2 and 2v1 in the ratio minus 1 by 2. By the property of t, apply that, and you get t of that should be equal to minus 1 times 1 by 2 times t of the image. So that is the image t of the image. So that one simplifies. Okay, so this t0 we can add and subtract t0 everywhere and then bring it in terms of phi, so that I can write it this equation in terms of phi. So this gives you, sorry, so this gives you tv minus t0 minus tv minus lambda b t0 is lambda minus 1 times that. So that gives you the equation that in terms of phi, okay, is equal to this. Okay, and similarly the other one I think that we have already done. So when you apply uh, so this finally we were looking at, I think there is a repetition there. So when you're looking at this, that in terms of phi is phi of 2v minus phi v1 plus v2 is equal to, so that gives you phi of v1 plus v2 is equal to. So basically it's a very simple argument by using the property of T, that it preserves collinearity and division ratios. T satisfies the property 2, namely uh, the phi is the part, if you subtract T0, then that is taking sum to the limit of, image of the sum is sum of the images, and sum of the scalar multiple is scalar multiple of the image. And conversely, if T has that property, one can work out backward, namely, you take sigma lambda I1 to n equal to 1, take a convex combination equal to 1. Then for V1, V2, Vn in R3, the T of this is equal to phi of this plus T of 0. In terms of phi, we have this property. And phi has that property of phi of the sum is equal to sum of that, so that is lambda I times this, right? And that I can write it back in terms of t, so minus plus t0, so I can bring it in plus t0, so that gives lambda I of tbi. So that says that for this kind of thing, lambda's sigma lambda tbi comes outside. Okay, thus whenever this is equal to 1, you get this property. So so hence, for the convex linear combination, it holds, so that is good enough. So basically, I think you should try to work it out yourself, because in a short span, I can just go on sliding, showing you the steps. That won't register in your mind. So try to prove this theorem, that if T preserves collinearity and division ratios, then it must look like, okay. Uh, Okay, so I think let me skip the remaining argument here. Okay, so the collinearity also can be proved by the similar arguments by writing the ABC, dividing them in a particular ratio, and doing it. So I think let me slowly slide it through, so that you can later on try to verify by looking at the proof. So let me slide it slowly so that it is recorded, and then you can look at the proof. Okay. So that is, if one holds, then it implies two, and these are the steps for that. And conversely, if I'm sorry, I'm rushing it through a bit so that I can give you a glimpse of what I'm trying to tell you is why one should study linear transformations at all. What's the need for that? We normally in our classrooms, whenever we study linear algebra, as soon as vector space is done, next comes the definition of a linear map, and then you start analyzing linear maps. We never bother to answer the question or ask the question why I am studying linear transformations. So this is a reason that because our underlying set is R3, it has a geometric structure, namely of collinearity and division ratios. So we would like those maps which preserve this. So that is given by what we call affine linear maps actually. Okay, and from the affine linear map, if you subtract the image of 0, you get what is called the linear map. Okay, so hence three folds, and finally the collinearity part. You can always pause your video when you're watching a video. So again, see again u minus v, you divide in this ratio and write this as well. So that proves. So that motivates one to define what is called a linear transformation. So what I have tried to show you quickly, hurriedly, is that a map T from V to W preserves division ratios and collinearity and keeps origin fixed, should have this property. It's equivalent to saying this property. So that's why we need to study these transformations. Right. So let us define that. And now, obviously, the next question comes. So keep in mind here, the left hand side, addition and scalar multiplication are in this vector space, and this on the image side is in W. So they are different spaces. This addition is not same as this. They can be, but they are in a different spaces actually. So keep that in mind. And linear transformation always keeps origin fixed, because when you put alpha equal to 0, t of 0 will be equal to 0. There are a lot of examples one can give for this. For example, let us look at txy is equal to x plus y, comma x minus y. Okay, from R2 to R3. So this is a map taking a point x comma y to a triplet x plus y, y, x minus y. And one can try to check whether this is linear or not. So to do that, we have to take 2 points, x1, y1, x2, y2, and see what is the image, whether it adds up or not. Okay. So if you t of x1, alpha of x1, y1 plus beta of x2, y2, by the scalar multiplication, this goes inside. So it is t of alpha x1 plus beta x2, comma alpha y1 plus beta y2, and t of something is x plus y. So first one x plus y, second is y itself, and the third is x minus y. So you write that, and once you similarly calculate the other side, and this come out to be same, then you verified that this is a linear map. Okay. So let us look at the map. Txy goes to x plus alpha, and y to y plus beta. So this is uh, shifting x to x plus alpha and y to y plus beta. Uh, 1 second poll, whether it is linear or not. Write in the chat box. If it is linear, say yes. If it is not linear, say no.
Saying that it is not linear.
It is not linear, right?
Yeah.
So, and obviously think, because why it is not linear, because a linear map should take 0 to 0, but if you take x to be 0, y to be 0, it is alpha comma beta, which may not be. So the answer is not fully correct.
This map is from R2 to R2, right? This R3 is typo.
Yes, that is a typo here. It should have been R2 to R2. It's a translation. This is what is called a translation in R2. In the plane, you shift everything by alpha plus beta, right? So that is a typo. Thanks. And this is linear only when alpha is equal to 0, beta is equal to 0. That means you are not translating by anything. So this is not a linear map, and that is one of the main problems when you do computer graphics. That the linear transformation, that the transformation which is translation is not linear, and that causes a problem in computer graphics because you would like to move something, translate something, and we'll see soon how all these translation rotations can be operated upon by matrix multiplications. And for that one requires a transformation T to be linear. So let me not go too much into these things, and probably related with matrices, saying that if you got a matrix A, which is m cross n, then you can introduce transformation by A. So TA is the linear transformation or transformation given by A. What it says, TA of U is A applied to U. If A is m cross n and U is a vector in Rn, then AU makes sense and you'll get a vector in Rm. So every matrix gives rise to a transformation by matrix multiplication, you can think of, and one can easily check that this is a linear transformation. And one, so every matrix gives rise to a linear For example, this is, let us look at the matrix cos theta minus sin theta cos theta, and what will be the linear transformation given by it. So the question is, for any vector xy, right? It's easier to understand this because angles are coming, so it's better to write x in terms of the polar coordinates and y in terms of polar coordinates. If you write in terms of that, then txy is just x, putting the value of x as r cos alpha and y equal to r sin alpha, the polar coordinates, then it becomes r cos theta plus alpha, r sin theta plus alpha, using trigonometric identities. That means the polar coordinates of the image are r remains the same, it is only shifting the angle, rotating the angle by an angle alpha. So this matrix induces a linear transformation which is a rotation. Right. Similarly, for example, 1 minus 1, that will give you y goes to minus y, x remains as it is, so y is shifting to minus y, so that means it is a reflection against x-axis. So most of the transformations that are needed can be so let me, here is the first observation about linear transformations. If, hello,
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
yeah, now I can hear you. Yes.
Yes. Sir, I have a question that rotation matrix given by A equals to cos theta minus sin theta and something. Sir, is it respect to in counterclockwise direction or clockwise direction?
I leave you to interpret whichever way you want to do it. Okay. So you have to fix a convention which way you are moving and accordingly decide, right?
Okay, sir. Okay, thank you.
So it changes the angle from theta to theta plus alpha, right? Now, how do you interpret it is your lookout of that, right? So mathematically, a linear transformation T from V to W is uniquely determined if you know the images of the basis element. So here the basis is going to play a part now. V is a vector space in Rn, so it has a basis. So let us say the basis is V1, V2, Vm, Vn, okay. And if that is the basis, and if you know the images TV1, TV2, TVN, then you know this transformation everywhere. So your work is reduced. The meaning saying that there is the reason is very simple, because every vector is a linear combination in terms of V1, V2, Vn, and a unique linear combination, right? The representation is unique. So when I apply T to that unique linear combination, I get the linear combination of the images of TV1. So if V is this, then T of V1 is this. So this says it is enough to know the linear transformation. If you want to know a linear transformation completely, then you should find a basis of the domain and evaluate on the basis elements. Then you know the linear transformation completely. So reducing the work. Okay, right. So I think maybe some examples always are good. So let us take V1 as 1 1 and V2 as minus 1 1 in R2. So that gives a basis for R2. Check that it is a basis, and T of R2 to R2. Let us define T of V1. For this, it is 1 0, and T of V2 minus 1 to 1. The image is 0 1. So with this knowledge, I can build up my T. So if I write x, y, any point in R2, x comma y, the coordinates, then first I have to express this in terms of the basis elements. Okay, so if I do that, so it is x plus y by 2 into V1 plus y minus x. So the here comes representing, finding the linear combination that gives you the representation of any element that these two span, and what is that representation. So this is where again the row equivalent form of a matrix will be useful. For very simple ones, you can do those Gauss elimination method very quickly, but it becomes higher order, then you need to go to the machines and do it. So T of xy is, this is scalar times v1 basis element. So image is x plus y by 2 and y minus x by 2. So that is the, okay, right. So that is how you find. Here is something called okay, I think let me just uh, uh, what is called the kernel of the map. T is always in algebra. Kernel means that those vectors which are killed by the transformation. So that is also called the null space of T, or the kernel of T. That is Tu equal to 0. And the range of this map, that is a subset, the subspace of W is again a subspace. Okay, that is the range space, and the dimension of the kernel is called null space is called nullity, and dimension of the range space is called the rank of the transformation. Why the same names are being used, I will explain it soon. And the relation says that dimension of the kernel is a subspace of the domain. Range is here, so dimension of the range space, that is what we are calling is for rank for the linear transformation, is something from the range. The two add up and give you dimension of the domain space V. So that is called the rank nullity theorem for the linear transformation T. And it's not very difficult to prove in this case because of extension of basis, right? So one can prove this very easily. I think most of you have proved this theorem in your what shall I say, in your classes. So this is standard theorem, standard proof. So let me not go into the proof of this. I'll come back to it when we do something more. Okay. So keep in mind the nullity is in the domain, that is a dimension of the null space, all elements which are killed, and the range space dimension is the rank of the transformation T. So look at the range. Range is a subset of W. Actually, it is a subspace, and dimension of that is called the rank, right? And one proves that the rank plus nullity is dimension of V. Its idea is very simple. You take a basis of the kernel space, extend it. Take the kernel space, its dimension is equal to known something, say R, take a basis of it, extend it to the whole of basis of V, go to the image thing, their kernels will be killed, and what is left is a basis of the range. So that is how you prove this thing. So let me skip the proof anyway, because it is normally done, and I have given you an idea of the proof. Okay. So a corollary of the rank nullity theorem, a very important and interesting. If T is 1, 1, okay, then means kernel is 0. Nothing else, then the 0 is killed, because 0 is always killed by linear transformation. And if 0 is killed, then T must be on 2, right? The rank must be full, so T must be on 2. So all these are equivalent things, uh, saying that for a linear transformation, if it is 1, 1, it must be also on 2, and it is same as saying the kernel is equal to 0. Is a consequence of the rank nullity theorem. Okay, right. So here is relating linear transformation with matrices. Uh, for let us say B is a basis of a vector space V, then every vector has a linear combination and a unique one. So we will start using this notation with a square bracket around V and B index lower B. That means the scalars alpha 1, alpha 2 n will write as alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha n, and this will be called as the coordinate vector of V. So in a vector space, if v1, v2, v1 are the basis, and keep in mind is we're taking an ordered basis. So what does order mean? You choose and fix the order, that this is the first element in the basis, this is the second element, is the third element, because if you change the order, then the alpha 1, alpha 2 order will change and this vector will change. So for consistency sake, we take a basis v1, v2, vn and fix the order. With this basis, every vector has a linear combination, so that scalars appearing in the linear combination in that order are written alpha 1, alpha n, and that is called a coordinate vector for the vector v in V. Okay, so let us here is a interesting theorem that suppose T and W are vector spaces, dimension of V is equal to n, okay, and dimension of W is equal to m. So T is from vector, the dimension of V is n, and this is m, n to m. Okay, a linear transformation. We fix a ordered basis of the domain v1, v2, vn, and v2 a ordered basis of W. Then the claim is there is a unique matrix, m cross n matrix, I can associate with this transformation T. Say that if you take a vector V, take its image, the image will be T of V. V is in V, image is in T of V is in W, and there I have got a basis V2. So I can write down what are the coordinates of the vector TV, the image. And it says that the coordinates of the image vector is same as A multiplied with the coordinates of the vector you started with, that is V, with respect to B. So this is and this matrix A, which is unique, associated with the given linear transformation with a given ordered basis B1, with a given ordered basis B2 of domain and codomain, that is called the matrix of the linear transformation. Okay, so how do we construct that? So let us go into the logistics of that. So the basic idea is, look, V is a vector, so it has got the coordinates alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha n with respect to V1. What does that mean? That means V is equal to sigma alpha I Vi, right? So the linear combination, the unique linear combination. Apply T to it, T being linear, I can write T of this is equal to alpha I T of Vi. Okay, alpha I T of Vi. And where is T of Vi? T of Vi is in W, right? And W has a ordered basis B2, so I can write a linear combination for T of Vi. So T of Vi is it is the ith Vi, so it will be summation some scalars wj, j going from 1 to n, so the scalars have to be indexed accordingly. So alpha ji, okay, wj. I'm purposefully writing at not alpha ij, I'm writing as alpha ji for a reason for that. You'll soon see. So T of Vi is this, and this value I can put it back in this equation. Then T of V will be equal to summation alpha I, summation alpha ji wj. So, and interchange the order of summation, what you will get is the following. So T of V will be equal to summation j equal to 1 to m alpha ji, alpha I was the original ones, the coordinates of V, wj. So these scalars multiplied by wj give me a representation for T of V in terms of wj, which is a basis for the range. So that means this must be the coordinates of T of V. This must give you the coordinates. So jth coordinate of T of V is this sum. So we can write down now. Okay, so let us A denote this matrix alpha ji. So then this is nothing but writing the T of V with respect to B2 is equal to this, right? That means for T of V is a linear combination. The coordinates of with respect to B are nothing but this is a multiplied by the coordinates of V, that is alpha 1 alpha n. So that is what, and we get that representation of and because it is a basis, so this representation is unique actually. That is not a difficult part to show, that the coordinates for a vector are unique, so that will give you the uniqueness also. So this is called the matrix representation of the linear transformation. Then T of is equal to this. So here is one, the order which I said I wrote as alpha ji, not alpha ij. T of vi is alpha ji. So that means what? What is this? If I take the ith vector in the domain, this is ith basis vector in the domain. Look at its image. That will be a linear combination of wj's. So that will give me the scalars alpha ji. Okay, and that is the j is varying, so that is the jth column. Okay, so sorry, that is the ith column. J is varying, so it is the ith column. So how do you get the matrix representation of a linear transformation T? Ordered basis of the domain. Okay, v1 v2 vn. Ordered basis of the range tw, where w is t is going to land up, and that is w1 w2 wm. Ordered basis, take the ith vector in the domain of the basis vector tvi, write it as a linear combination, and that gives you the ith column for that matrix. So that is how you write the matrix representation of so for every linear transformation there is a unique matrix, and constantly we have already seen that every matrix gives rise to a linear transformation. So there is a one-to-one correspondence between linear transformations from V to W, and where V is dimension n, W is of dimension m, then the correspondence is between this and matrices of order m cross n. This matrix is of order m cross n, m rows, n columns. Probably I think calls for a example. So let me see if I am written okay. Right. So T is from R3 to R2. So take a vector in R3, x, y, and z. What is the image? X minus 3z, 2y plus y plus z. So it is element in R2. So I am given you an element in R2. Okay. Right. So let us write down, it's not difficult to check that this is a linear transformation. I leave that for you to check. And let us write down what is the matrix representation of this. For that I have to fix up a basis on the domain. and I have to fix up a basis on the range. So let us, with respect to standard basis. So what is the standard basis in R3? Standard basis on R3 is the one 1 0 0, 0 1 0, and 0 0 1, right? For Rn, the standard basis, the ith element in the standard basis is 1 at the ith place, everything else 0. So what is the first element in the standard basis? 1 0 0. So what is T of 1 0 0? Let us compute that. So T of 1 0 0, 1 0 0. So 1, y is 0, z is 0. So that is 2. So T of, right, y is z is 0. So T of 1 1 1 is 1 2. Similarly, T of 0 1 0, put the values, you compute it is 0 1. And T of 0 0 1, the third element is minus 3 comma 1. So what is 1 2? 1 2 is the column, first column of the matrix represent. See, this is 3 to 2. So what is going to be the order of the matrix? It is 2 cross 3. So the matrix is going to be 2 cross 3. There are going to be 3 columns and 2 rows. So the matrix is 1 2. So the first column, second basis element 0 1 0, image is 0 1. So that is the second one, and the third one 0 1 1, that is the third one. So this is the matrix representation of T with respect to standard basis on domain, standard basis on. If you change the basis either in domain or in the range, then accordingly the matrix will change, and you will have a different representation. And for that, you need to work out, once again, you will need the help of a row echelon form of a matrix. That will be useful in computing those things. Okay. So here are which are I will not go into all of this because they are all standard things. If T1 and T2 are two linear maps, then sum of them is again a linear map. Scalar multiple is again a linear map, and you can write down the matrix representations. The T1 plus T2, the sum of them is a linear transformation. Its matrix representation with respect to a basis B1 in the domain, B2 in the range. So top is for the domain V, for W it is B2. It is same as the matrix representation of T1 plus matrix representation of T2. And similarly for scalar multiple, it comes out into the, so this is scalar multiple of the matrix. There's alpha times T1 is a linear transformation with this as the matrix representation. Okay. For the composition is again it's a matrix multiplication, so one can check that. If I did look at sorry, so you can check for the sum, it is the same. So example, I think only these examples are best if you do it in your tutorial session. Take probably Dilpreet will put some problems there to give you a practice if you are not already. Some of you, I think, have already done these kind of things. It's only refreshing your memory so that you understand things. Okay. Similarly, for composition, you can compose maps, and when you compose maps, you get what is called matrix multiplication. So it says if S composite T, if you take linear transformation from V to W and a linear transformation S from W to U, then the composite is again a linear transformation. Composite of linear transformations is a linear transformation. So S composite T is from V to U, and so for this linear map, the matrix representation comes from the product of the corresponding matrices. So S composite T B1 B2, right, is S with respect to B2 B3, because S is from where to where? S is from S is from W. So B1 B2 B3. So B2 B3 and T is from B1, B2. In some sense, you can look at nicely that this B2, B2 is sort of getting eliminated and B1, B3. So that is a composite one. And from here, you can go to if the inverse of a linear transformation. If a linear transformation is 1, 1, then it will be also on 2. And so you will have the inverse transformation, and you can write T inverse. So T inverse with respect to B is TB inverse, is the inverse of that matrix you can write. Okay. So invertibility and compute the matrix. So is a sort of example to give a practice that we normally do it for our students. So find out compute T of B or B with respect to this basis, that is the standard basis, and compute what is check it is not 0, so inverse is available, and compute T inverse of alpha beta. Okay, so what will be T inverse? How do you compute T inverse given T is this? That itself also requires work, that it goes back to xy. So find out a formula for T inverse and then find out a matrix representation. Probably it's a good exercise for to work out. I don't know, tutorial session may not have that much time to work out examples, but it's a good exercise. It involves everything, computing the inverse and then computing the matrix of the inverse and checking that the formula, this formula is works very well. Okay. Now I would like to slightly shift my concept. I don't know how much time I've got. Uh, I have got around 10 minutes more.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
right. See, till now we have been looking at the geometry in R2 and R3 and Rn, in the sense that we have been looking at um, whether points are collinear or not, the ordinary geometry, whether points are collinear or not, whether the division ratios, what are division ratios, whether that are preserved or not. So those transformations we have looked into. Okay, but there is geometry in R2 and R3 or even Rn actually is something more. Geometry is not complete without angle, right? So not only there are distances, there are angles involved also. So what is the geometry in R2 or R3? That comes via dot product. So one defines the dot product of two vectors A and B to be equal to A1 B1 plus A2 B2 plus A3 B3. And how does it this introduce geometry? Basically, the length of a vector or the length comes from square root of A dot A. So dot product gives you the notion of length, okay, and also gives you the notion of angle, that A dot B can be written as norm A, or the magnitude of A, magnitude of B into cos of theta, where theta is the angle between the vectors A and B, right? So now the geometry of R2 or R3 becomes more subtle, because there is a notion of distance. Say collinearity and division ratios were only up to distances, and now there is an angle. And how does the angle helps? It helps us to define what is called perpendicular vectors. Okay, so geometry will take it from here. Two vectors are perpendicular if A dot B is equal to 0. Okay, the dot product is equal to 0, and that comes from the cos of the angle. If that is equal to 0, the angle is okay 90 degrees. Okay, so what we want to do is the following. Uh, Given look at that standard base is 100010010. This is a basis of R3, but it has a special property, namely 100 dot product with 010 is 0, and dot product of any two of them is equal to 0. So not only this is a basis, the all three vectors are mutually perpendicular to each other, and the length of each is equal to 1. So this is a very special kind of basis for R3, right? So the question one would like to ask is the following: when can we define, okay, given any vector space, can we say it has a basis of this type of structure, namely uh, uh, if it is a vector space V, a subset of Rn, can I say that there is a basis for V? That we know the basis exist, that is by our earlier considerations. But now I want to ask a question: does there exist a basis so that any two elements in that are perpendicular to each other, and length of each one of them is equal to 1? So we like to answer that question, and okay. Now, the advantage of having such kind of a basis is the following: that if you given a vector x, y, and z, then what are its coordinates? Coordinates are x, y, and z, but x is nothing but the dot product of x, y, z with 1, 0, 0, and the dot product of y is the dot product of the vector with the second standard basis element is y. So it says if you have a basis where the elements are mutually perpendicular to each other and each has got length 1, then you have an extra advantage that the coordinates of that vector are immediately known. Because in a vector space, we said given a vector v and given an ordered basis, there is a unique linear combination, right? So we can get coordinates of that vector, but we don't know how to compute those coordinates, right, easily. But here it gives a very easy way of computing if that the basis has that special property, then the coordinates are immediately known. So the idea is to convert, right? So how do I find a basis consisting of those perpendicular things? Okay. So there's a dot product, and properties of the dot product is always put in equal to 0, equal to 0 if v is equal to 0. That is a norm. So quickly go through this so that I can say what I want to say. Uh, these things one can prove very easily. Cauchy-Schwarz inequality, that the dot product has this property. Dot product is written with this special thing because that notation takes over to in general setup also. And triangle inequality, the length of u plus v plus w is, so that is triangle inequality, right? And keep in mind the dot product a dot a is equal to norm square, okay, and are perpendicular, then this is called the Pythagoras theorem. uh, in R2, R3, or even in Rn you can call it Pythagoras theorem, and proofs are all left for you to work out. This good exercises in trying to understand the dot product. So here is a very easy thing to show that if v1, v2, vk is a set of vectors which is uh, perpendicular to each other, vj is perpendicular to vl, so then we say this is a orthogonal set of vectors. So a set of vectors is called orthogonal if any two of them are perpendicular to each other, and we say there is a orthonormal set if length of each one of them is 1. They are perpendicular and the length is equal to 1. So this is a question one would like to answer, that if B is a basis of a vector space, we say B is an orthonormal basis if this also forms a orthonormal set, right? Like 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0 and 0, 0, 1 in R3. If these vectors are mutually orthogonal and length is equal to 1, then we say it is a orthonormal set, right? So obvious thing, every if they are mutually orthogonal, then they are also linearly independent. That is a very easy thing to show, because if sigma alpha I vi is equal to 0, take the dot product with any one of them, right? Say vi or vl. When you take the dot product, mutual orthogonality says the dot product is equal to 0 when j is not equal to l. when j is equal to L, it is equal to 1. So that gives you CL is equal to 0. So all orthogonal, actually that is good enough. All orthogonal set of vectors are linearly independent, because you don't need this value to be equal to 1, because if this product is 0 and this value is not 0, then you can always conclude it is equal to 0, right? But every converse need not be true. A linearly independent set may not be orthogonal. One can construct many examples. Take any two vectors which are not coincidental, and you can always show in R2 many basis vectors, right? So that is, we have already shown that. So the question is, uh, uh, another advantage of having an orthonormal basis is the following: because the coordinates are known, so every vector can be written as the expansion very easily. X u1 gives you the coordinate, first coordinate, u1 is the vector, so that is expansion is possible, right? So advantages of so how to construct the idea comes from geometry again. If you are given two vectors, okay, then we know in R2 if these vectors are not coincidental, then or not parallel, then they will generate everything. But to make it perpendicular, what one does is this: if I drop a perpendicular, then this vector and this vector are perpendicular, right? And they will again generate the whole thing. So, and how do you get this vector? This is this vector minus this much length of that, okay? So I can show a GeoGebra applet for this, but that is not, there is no time for that. So what we are saying is, given two vectors, there is one vector here, one vector here, right? I want, if this is a perpendicular, right? So this vector will be perpendicular to this vector, and what is this vector? It is this vector minus that much length, that much magnitude of this vector. So if you subtract that, this minus this, that gives you a vector which is perpendicular to it, and that is a projection actually. If you drop a perpendicular, this is the projection. If you subtract the projection in that direction, you get a vector which is perpendicular, and that is a basic idea. So it says that uh, inductively you can produce a orthogonal set of vectors which span the same thing, because at every stage we will only remove what is a scalar multiple of the previous ones. So here is what, this is what is called the Gram-Schmidt process, and many of you would have done it probably. So if B is a orthonormal set, sorry, B is a basis, a spanning set for a vector space V, may not be linearly independent. If linearly independent is very good, you will have saved a lot of work, right? So one can do that, but we don't have to do that. Define W1, which is equal to V1, and W2. What you do is look at V2 W1 divided by. So this is what is the projection, right? Remove the projection in the direction of W1, and then you will get a vector which is perpendicular to W2. And because you are removing only a scalar multiple of W1, the span of W1 and W2 will be same as the span of V1 and V2. And this keep V2 as it is. If this W1 is 0, then keep it as it is, because that will happen if the independence is not coming. So inductively, having constructed V1, construct V2, having constructed W1, W2, Wj minus 1, construct Wj by removing the projection of all the previous ones from Vj. And they're all scalar multiples, so the span does not change, but the things become mutually perpendicular. So this is an inductive way of constructing a orthonormal set, orthonormal spanning set from the given spanning set. Okay, but this will give you actually an orthogonal set, not a orthonormal one. They will be all mutually perpendicular, and then you have to make them norm equal to 1 to make them orthonormal. Okay, so but when you remove, you will only get perpendicularity. Okay, so that is I think probably this is the right stage to stop. So what I have tried to do today is, in the part one, we saw that we looked at the basis, dimension, and rank nullity theorem for the matrices. And here, then we looked at the linear transformations. Why do we need to study linear transformations? Right? I gave a reason for that, which normally hardly anybody tells in their classroom. This is a thing I would like to tell to you as those of you are teachers. Then try to give a reason why do you study something, why your students should study something. That is one thing. And second, I'm now and then uh, I'm asking questions and troubling my host that please see what is the chat box, Dilpreet, what is the chat box saying, and so on. Because I want my students to react and talk mathematics. So, very two important things. You should be interactive in your classroom. Try to excite your students. Try to trouble your students to talk mathematics, right? And secondly, try to motivate them why they should be studying. So I think let me stop here today. With any questions somebody would like to ask, Dilpreet?
Sir, there are requests to share slides.
Okay. So my actual slides.
Yes.
See, actual slides may not help them because what I'm saying is not written. Some of the things are not written in the slides, right? So, but I will try to see in what way I can share. I will talk to you over the phone. How do I share these things with the students?
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, fine. Okay. Anybody else other than asking for the ready-made material available?
Nothing else. Any student, any
Nothing
question?
else?
I'm unmuting all of them.
Yeah. You see, I always get a very uneasy feeling at the end of a lecture when I say any questions. If there are no questions, that can mean only one thing. Either nobody has understood what I have said, and there are no doubts, which is very unlikely, right? That in a mathematics class, everybody has understood everything, right?
Yes. Yes.
So I feel happy if even if there is a one or two questions asked, so that they because reactions from students, reaction from the audience help the presenter to do a better job next time.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, please.
Yes, sir. So I have a question that if I have a linear transformation from a vector space to another vector space, and if I compute the matrix of this linear transformation with respect to the standard basis of those vector spaces, then I can write it as TV equals to AV. The A is this matrix for all V.
Yeah, you should keep in mind that
Yes.
when you take a vector v, you should
Yes.
compute its coordinates with respect to the basis in the domain,
Yes.
and then apply t to it that goes to the range. And
Yes.
you should write down the coordinates of the image with respect to the basis in the range.
Yes.
Then only a applied to v, the coordinate vector, will be equal to the coordinates of av, the
Yes.
multiplication. Yes.
So I'm saying that if I compute this matrix with respect to the standard basis, standard ordered basis, then I can write TV is equals to AV for all V in this domain. But I have checked this. But if I compute this matrix with another other basis other than the standard basis, then I cannot write it as
You cannot,
TV
because
equals to AV for all elements.
okay, then your scalars will change. So let me probably just quickly say what you are saying. You see,
So I want to know the reason.
yeah, V to W. Here
Yes.
is a basis B1. Here
Yes.
is a basis B2,
Yes.
right? ordered basis, then what we are saying is look at TV. Take a element V here. Look at TV, right? This goes where is TV? That goes in W. So there is a basis B2.
Yeah.
And take V. What is V? The V is in V. There is a basis B1. So there is a basis B1 here. So these are the coordinates of V in basis V1. These are the coordinates of TV in basis V2, right? So you want to write the matrix here.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
the matrix of T should be with respect to basis B1 here and with respect to B2 here, right? Because that is the basis here. That is the basis here. So matrix of T will be with respect to the basis here. So this is what is going to be your A.
Yes.
So maybe you are making a mistake of not writing this matrix A. You may be writing in terms of the standard basis, but you have to forget the basis, standard basis and anything. You have to concentrate on this basis B1 here and B2 here. So then this A, you should replace it by that matrix.
Yes.
Then everything will be okay. So it should be matrix of T with respect to B1 and with respect to B2. See, again, you can see something nice happening. This is getting cancelled with this. Then T of B2. You are getting that.
Yes. But sir, I'm saying that I have checked some examples for some R3 to R3, something like that.
Why
That
don't you do one thing? You write down whatever you are saying,
okay,
right? And in the tutorial class, we can discuss the particular example. You are probably asking me, please pinpoint where I'm making the mistake.
okay.
Yeah. So probably you try to redo it, but keep in mind what is the basis here, what is the basis there.
Yeah.
For example, let me give you one exercise straight away. Let's take a map T from R2 to R2. Okay. Here the basis B1 I will give you 0, 1, and the other basis element I can give you is sorry, where is the pen? The basis element I can give you is say 1, 1. That is B1. And let us write B2 a basis on R2 again, which is equal to, I interchange the two, 1, 1. Or change the order now, and 0, 1. So that is my B2. So this is an ordered basis. In this order is this first, this second. In this the order is interchange. So these are different basis, ordered basis. Okay. And now let us look at the map T from XY. Okay. Let us take a very simple one. X plus Y and X minus Y. This is a map from R2 to R2 which does. So find out the matrix of T with respect to B1, with respect to B2, and verify this formula. Will that be okay for you?
Oh, okay, sir.
So, you follow what I am asking you to do?
Yes, yes, I understood.
I have given you linear transformation. And check it is a linear transformation. For that linear transformation, with respect to B1, with respect to this basis, so you have to compute T of the first element. That will give you the first column. T of this one, the second column, but you have to represent that in terms of this basis vectors. So it's not that straightforward a job. It's not the standard basis everywhere. It's the other way around. Yeah. Anybody else has a question to ask?
Hello.
Yep.
Sir, I have one question. Am I audible?
Yeah, now you are audible.
Sir, we all know that translation is not a linear transformation, okay?
Translation is not linear. Yes.
So, sir, what concept we use in a computer graphics to translate the line from one place to another place in a computer screen?
Yeah. So that actually, what you use is what are called projective coordinates.
Okay.
There is a concept called projective coordinates. What you do is you lift the translation from R2 to it's a transformation in R3
Okay.
using what are called projective coordinates. Okay.
Okay.
And there in R3 it becomes linear.
Oh.
When you use projective coordinates. So you take coordinates in the plane, go to R3 with projective coordinates, there translate this projective thing becomes linear, you translate it and then you come back to R2.
So ultimately, sir, we are converting linear thing into linear in other spaces.
Yes, in some other space, operate it and come back. And there is a possibility of coming back.
Yeah, then we are coming back. Okay, okay. Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, fine. Anybody else want to ask something before I request Dilpreet to wind up?
Sir, can you please explain once again the process how a basis can be changed to orthogonal basis by using geometry?
Yeah, basically, see that. Okay, let me just see where it was. Okay, no, not this one. I think I closed it probably. Anyway, doesn't matter. Let me draw it for you. You see, you have got one vector here, another vector here. This is v1, this is v2. Okay, in the plane. Is it okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So keep saying yes, sir, so that I know that you are listening to me.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. So these two vectors will generate the plane. Do you agree to that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now let me draw a perpendicular from this. So call this point as O, call this as A, call this as P if you like. Right? Now,
Okay, sir.
so is it clear or shall I do it more?
No, no, sir, it's fine.
Yeah. Instead of using V1 and V2, what I will do is I will use V1 and AP.
Okay.
Then they are perpendicular. And what is AP? AP is nothing but this minus that much, right? Projection. This is a projection.
Yes, sir.
So
Yes.
from V2, I subtract the projection, I get AP.
Yes.
And continuously go on doing it iteratively. Right? So once you have gotten V2 from the projected one, the next one, remove the projections of these two together and then go on doing it iteratively. So that is the basic idea.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I think Preeta probably, Dilpreet probably, if any more questions or?
Sorry.
I don't know, any more questions or shall we wind up?
So I'm asking participants, any more questions for sir, or shall we wind up this session here?
They can ask tomorrow also, probably problem session when we meet.
Okay.
Yeah.
If no questions, shall we end this session here? You can type in chat if you don't have any question. Please write. Okay, so sir, there are no more questions. So tomorrow we will meet at 4 p.m. for lecture 5 of Professor Rana at 4 p.m. and there will be a tutorial of starting from 5:15 p.m.
Okay, fine.
Okay. So I'm ending this session here. Bye. See you tomorrow at 4 p.m. Lecture is at 4 p.m. Then tutorial is from 5:15 p.m. Okay.
Right.
Bye.
Bye. Take care, everybody.